Hello and time appropriate greetings for whenever this video finds you. Welcome back to our mini series exploring the RHEL 10 beta. I'm your host, Matt, and in the booth today is producer Scott. This episode, joining us, special guest Rich Jerrido. Rich, why don't you tell the fine folks out there who you are, what you do, and what do you do for fun?
Alrighty, so I'm Rich Jerrido. I'm, I guess, a legacy Red Hatter at this point. I've been here for almost 15 years. Let's see, I've worked in a number of capacities. My current gig is I work on RHEL management and Red Hat Satellite. Previously, I did a lot of work on the subscription experience, which we'll talk about some of that stuff today. And as far as fun, I actually like cooking, cocktails, woodworking, those two things. Oh, and travel for sure. I definitely love travel.
That's certainly a wide breadth of things to keep you busy. And I'm sure we could spend the entire day talking about any of those. But as you said, we are here to talk about something else, a problem I ran into that I think you can help me with and maybe some other folks. Before we get to that, though, release note of the week. So this was brought to us by an anonymous user. But have you ever had reason, Rich, you may have run into this, had to resort to a combination like awk and RPM query formatting if you needed to get a list of RPMs and then sort them by their actual version as opposed to just, random alphabetical things. So apparently we don't need to do that anymore. We've brought RPM sort into the family. So now you can do that with a simple command. Pipe in an output of an RPM QL, and boom, now an actual version order. No more kernel 6.1, kernel 6.10, kernel 6.11, 6.2. RPM sort takes care of that for you.
So you mean I don't have to read the RPM manual page to figure out the right query format craziness anymore?
Nope. And then you don't have to worry about trying to awk and said, wait, which version? How do I separate out that? I got to do this by periods and then yeah, no more. Just RPM sort. We're done.
That's outstanding, actually. Kudos to the engineers that pulled that one through.
Exactly. It's only taken 10 years, but hey, we can sort by Nevra. So other RPM related topics, how do we get them? So one thing before we get there, so this is all about the RHEL beta. And I've been saying here and in other places that 2024 has been the year that we rethought beta. But if I'm honest and clear about that, that was really just us on the RHEL team rethinking beta. You were actually on the team that looked at sort of the Red Hat wide beta programs, subscriptions, and whatnot. So can you give us a little bit about what happened there and how this sort of beta for everyone came about?
Yeah, so a couple years back, this was actually May of 21 was when it rolled out into production. So RHEL 10 will actually be our second major version of RHEL that has gone out under this new paradigm. But one of the things we had looked at was whenever a RHEL beta would come around, there's this process that we would ask the user to go through to request a beta subscription, which we then had to entitle your account with that beta subscription, which has a little bit of a time lag on it, right? It can take up to an hour, sometimes even up to 24 hours to give folks access to the beta subscription. Meanwhile, if you're a RHEL user and you want to use the beta bits, you got to wait until all that completes, right? And then you had to repeat that through every RHEL beta, whether it was a minor version beta or a major version beta. And it was an unnecessary level of friction that we were inflicting upon our users. So we took a step back and we were like, do we really need to have a sign up process for our betas? No, we really didn't. So what we decided to do was we said, instead of having an explicit sign up process for the beta, when you acquire a Red Hat subscription, any subscription, doesn't matter what kind, doesn't even matter what family, right? If it's a developer for individual subscription or you bought a middleware subscription, we don't care. You're a Red Hat customer at that point. We therefore give you access to the betas. We give you perpetual access to the betas. As long as you are, a user of a valid Red Hat subscription, you will have access to the Red Hat Enterprise Linux beta programs. So you'll notice this in your Red Hat account. If you actually look in your subscription inventory, you'll see a subscription called the Red Hat Beta Access subscription. It has an unlimited quantity because we don't care how many of them you run. It's just beta software. And we give you those, again, as long as, you're a Red Hat customer. So if you actually look at the end date of it, it always matches the future most date of the latest expiring subscription you have. And with that being in your account, You can go to the Red Hat, downloads portal, download the RHEL, in this case, the RHEL 10 Beta ISO. And similarly, you can register a RHEL 10 Beta system and get access to the bits. And in conjunction with simple content access, which we're going to talk about in quite a bit of detail during this talk, your beta experience basically is register the system, DNF install the packages you want, no more, no less.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a much easier the way than again, I keep dating myself in all of these episodes, but in beta's days of yore, that trying to get access, and we spent most of the time in the beta program trying to figure out how to get the bits than actually trying to use them. So yeah, this sort of subs for everyone who's got an active account is a much easier way to go about providing access and getting these things in people's hands. Speaking for subs for everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe. I know we have to do this. We will be taking a short break, so hit that bell. You'll get a notification when we're back. And with that, I want to know, Scott, if you can go ahead and bring up the screen share. I captured something, Rich, on a RHEL 10 beta system that confused me. I'm an old school sysadmin. I've been doing this for quite a while. You and I have known each other for probably longer than either one of us would like to admit on the call. But this looks different and a little scary, like disabled subscriptions. I just registered. Like what's going on here? And I see this simple content access. Right. So let's start there. Right. So
all right. Yeah.
Tell me what that is and tell me what we're looking at here.
Yeah. So there's two things that are basically happening as part of the overall RHEL subscription experience, right? The first one is the rollout of simple content access, which is by and large complete for the vast majority of our customers. And what simple content access is a set of technologies that exist both in our hosted properties as well as satellite that simplifies the subscription experience for folks who are using things like Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So in the past, you would register a system, you would attach a subscription, and attach the correct subscription, sometimes even more than one subscription, depending upon what products you're using. And those subscriptions would unlock access to various RPM repositories so that you can install packages on the system. And while that works for the most part, it had a number of downsides. One of the downsides is you kind of got to know what subscription does what. And it's a lot of domain expertise that went into understanding, well, this RHEL subscription goes on this system and this OpenShift subscription goes on that system. And one of the downsides of all of that is this level of complexity that the operator of Red Hat technology need not be burdened with. So we introduced simple content access along with some other tools that we'll talk about today, such as the subscription service and system purpose, to make the subscription experience opinionated for various personas. So from a RHEL perspective, you no longer need to know what subscription I need to attach when registering a system. You simply register the system, and then you enable whichever repositories you need. If you need AppStream and Base OS, those are enabled out of the box. But if you needed something additional, such as like Code Ready Builder, you run the appropriate command, you enable Code Ready Builder. The second part of this is a lot of the tools inside of RHEL were built for the old experience. And over time, we've been retrofitting and changing those tools so that they work better in the world of simple content access. And that's what brings us to the status message that you're seeing here. Okay. In the old world with entitlements, subscription status was a thing that was calculated for each individual system, right? Do you have a subscription attached that covers the products that are installed on this system? Well, when simple content's enabled, that's no longer a concept. Hence why we, today at least, show the status as being disabled, because we are not calculating subscription compliance for that individual system. That can be confusing. Totally understand that. So one of the features that we're going to land, and it's going to land in 10.0, I think 10.0Z, and I think we're going to backport it as well for RHEL 9 and RHEL 10, is we're going to change this status message to be more clear what's going on, right? Because this disabled here does not mean your system is broken. It does not mean you have done something wrong or it is misconfigured. It only means we are no longer calculating subscription compliance for this system. So in the future, when we do roll out that patch, you're going to see the status message change from being disabled, which doesn't really give you any good information. And we're going to change the status message to say something either like registered or not registered, because that would give you, confirmation that, yes, I successfully connected the system and I can access all the things I need to access.
Got it. That makes a lot more sense. And I think as somebody who, again, I'm going to do it anyway, who accidentally installed RHEL 4 ES on a system that needed RHEL 4 AS and could not see 2 out of 4 CPUs, this feels like a much, much better place. I'm glad to see that it's not only going to be for coming up for RHEL 10, but we're also going to see this sort of thing in RHEL 9, so that we get a little bit of clarity for folks like me who've been doing this a long time. And clearly, I need to update sort of my thinking, but also probably it sounds like some of my understanding of the tools that I should and shouldn't be using to appropriately get the right access to software that I need. So, why don't you? Is it possible we can dig in a little bit more about like what should I be doing today instead of scaring myself with a perfectly fine message, and what that's going to look like going forward from a tooling aspect.
Alrighty. So yeah. So from the perspective of the tools, right? We've been working, and my teammate Christian, who runs the client tools team, he's been working on unifying the RHEL registration tools, right? And it's a particularly large body of work. Also, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we are limited by the speed of the RHEL lifecycle, right? So there's certain changes that we can only make in a major release versus a minor release. So you'll notice that if you were to compare, say, RHEL 10 to RHEL 7, you're going to see slightly different experiences in those releases, not because, like we're leaving stuff out. It's just because there's things I can do in RHEL 10 that I cannot do in RHEL 7. So specifically from a tooling perspective, we're unifying all of the RHEL client tools. And when I say the client tools today, I mean the tools inside of RHEL that connect you to a management tool that Red Hat makes. So that would be Subscription Manager, that would be the Insights client, and then 30, that would be RHC, right? And those tools work in various capacities, either against our hosted properties or against a Red Hat satellite, if you're a satellite user. What we're doing over time, and you're going to see this over time. You'll see some of this in RHEL 10. You're going to see even more of it in RHEL 11, roughly 3-ish or so years from now. But what we're going to do is we're going to unify those tools and those experiences such that, you don't have to worry about, well, I use Subscription Manager for this, I use Insights Client for that, and I use this third tool for this other thing. They'll eventually unify on a singular tool, and you'll start to see that in RHEL 10. So if we can bring up my terminal window, I can go ahead and show you how that works in RHEL 10 beta.
Awesome.
So on this RHEL 10 beta system, when you first log into it, and I've already logged into it earlier, so I'll just pull this up. And our message of the day, one of the things that we wanted to do is just very simple. Like if you log into a RHEL system, we should tell you, here's how you connect that system, right, to Red Hat. And what you'll notice here that depending upon, how up to date your RHEL systems are, you may or may not heard of the RHC command. The RHC command stands for Remote Host Configuration. It is intended to start unifying together the experiences that we previously had in Subscription Manager, as well as the Insights client tool. So RHC is going to be your front door into the RHEL experience. And that'll connect you to things such as, our systems inventory, so we can count your product usage. It'll connect you to things such as some of the analytics that we offer in the Insights family. Tools like Subscription Manager and Insights Client, they still exist in RHEL 10, right? And if you have, automation that still calls on those tools, that still works, right? But over time, you're going to see more and more capabilities in the RHC tool. And, and over time, we're going to put less and less into Subscription Manager and the Insights Client. So as you can see here, we have a quick little page here that if you don't know much about registering a RHEL system, here's a URL. You can go click on that, learn about it. And then we generally, tell folks to register systems with activation keys instead of their username and password. just because you can use activation keys and automation, and you probably don't want to put your username and password into any form of automation that you're using. So I'm going to go ahead and get this system registered, and I'm just going to follow the prompts as given. Activation key, and I have a key here that I'm going to use. 74326. Oops. Classic problem here.
But that's why
I made the mistake.
Options, right?
I made the mistake of using the old subscription manager flag, not the RHC flag. They are slightly different. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and hit RHC with the connect option using activation key and my org ID. And I'll show you how to find your activation keys and org IDs in a second. But this will go ahead and get the system registered to Red Hat and connected to the analytics services. So this will take like another couple of seconds and it'll be good to go. And then one of the big things that I'll talk about while this is currently loading is, again, if you are familiar with Red Hat's hosted properties, you'll notice that we've made a switch over to the hybrid cloud console for a lot of our systems management stuff. So you're going to see during this demo, we're going to walk through a lot of the functionality that exists at the Red Hat hybrid cloud console. Actually, so that should get us connected in just a couple more seconds. It's picking up the analytics payload. That's what's taking it a second, and then it'll be up, ready to go.
Cool. So while we, she's ready. So keep going.
So now that the system's registered and connected, you can see we've connected on the subscription side. So the system will actually show up in inventory and be counted for subscription purposes. It's also connected to all of our analytics services as well. Not all of them, but a few, right? And they list the ones that are configured. Now, at this point, there's nothing else I need to do to the system to use it other than literally use it. So if I wanted to update it, for instance, I just run DNF update. I don't have to, attach a subscription or anything crazy like that. It just works, right? We don't attach subscriptions. Pool IDs are no longer relevant, right? As long as you have the valid subscriptions, you can connect, your systems and you can register them. There's no, I have to attach this subscription or this pool ID. If you have access to the software, you can go ahead and register the system. The only thing you have to do here is enabling the optional repositories like Code Ready Builder, for instance. I'm using that as an example. Enabling the optional repositories if you, were to so need them. So I'm not going to go ahead and update the system just because we know what updates look like. But yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the next topic.
Cool. So I mean, that's a much faster, cleaner thing than what I was doing. So I'm happy to see that now. It looks like I just need to switch some of my internal workflows to use RHC to connect as opposed to Subman, and I should be off to the races. Is that about right?
Yep. So I would recommend for most folks, you want to use the RHC command to connect. Again, because it connects you to the subscription services and the analytics services. There are some legacy use cases where I would use Subscription Manager, but they are far and few between.
Well, I will make sure to wipe that from my brain as we move into this brave new world. So you mentioned this is all going into the new console experience. Do we know what that looks like, and how do we find what we just did if we're not looking at the portal anymore?
Alrighty. So if we want to bring up my web browser, I can go ahead and show you. So what I have shown up here is the Red Hat Hybrid Cloud Console, which is available at console.redhat.com. When you register a system, they will show up in the inventory in the Hybrid Cloud Console. And for most users, even when you head over to the old portal, the access.redhat.com portal, most of that portal is closed off for you at this point. We have some new landing pages, new banners that basically just redirect you over to the Hybrid Cloud Console. So yes, we have moved your keys. The keys is in a different place. But the functionality that exists in the Hybrid Cloud Console matches or exceeds what was available in access.redhat.com. And we'll walk through kind of some of how all that works. So first thing I want to go into is I'm going to go into the activation key workflow and kind of tie it back to the demo that we just did. So we registered a system, we used an activation key, but where do activation keys come from? How are they created? So one of the things that I do like about the Hybrid Cloud Console is that you can hit favorites on services because there's a lot of services available here, like things for OpenShift and Ansible, and a lot of those things are wonderful. I'm working on RHEL right now, so I want to favorite my RHEL services that I use a lot of. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the activation keys page, which I have favorited. We're going to go ahead and create an activation key. And again, if you're unfamiliar with activation keys, they're usable to register systems in lieu of username and password. So let's give this one a name. I'll call it demo 3. I'm going to skip a description. And then one of the new things we've added to activation keys is we added a little bit of opinionation to them, right? So now if you were building something like RHEL for SAP, or you wanted to lock yourself onto a particular minor release because you have an ISV application that requires, let's say, 9.4 EUS, you can actually build that into your activation key automation. You can do that by hitting these extended support releases. So let's say you wanted to use RHEL EUS. I'm going to just pick this 9.4 here since I'm using that example. We'll go ahead and we hit next. And what we're going to do behind the scenes is we know all the repos that you need for EUS, right? So we're going to build them into your activation key so that when you go to register the system, you don't have to actually go enable EUS repos anymore. They're already there, right? So instead of you having to go read through the Red Hat product docs and be like, how do I set up EUS? Just put it on your activation key. The next thing that we introduced is we introduced this concept called system purpose. And this is super important for subscription counting. So pay attention because this is super important. In system purpose, what we do is instead of asking you to attach subscriptions to systems and try to count those, what we ask you to do is tell us the truth about your inventory. What systems in your inventory are production? Which ones are dev? Which ones do you plan to have a premium SLA on? Which ones are standard? Because I can't measure that. That's not a thing I know. I can tell you if it's RHEL. I can tell you what version of RHEL it is, but I can't tell you, whether you intended to use the RHEL system in your production environment or not. System purpose is the tagging system that allows you, the administrator, to express that to us. And we're going to use that when we go into the subscription service and show you how to monitor your usage of Red Hat technology. But one of the things you can do with system purpose is instead of having to set it on every system, which you can do if it was maybe a brownfield environment, you can actually build it into your activation keys as well. So when you register systems, they already are, properly tagged. So in this case, I'm building a RHEL server. I plan on calling Red Hat 24/7 because this is a production box. So I'm going to select the premium SLA. And then again, it's a production use case. So I'm going to tag it with production. Go ahead, hit next. It's going to ask me to confirm I got all that right. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And I'm going to go view my activation key. And what you'll notice is that because I picked one of those workload options, right? I picked that I wanted to lock the system 9.4. So we set the release version to 9.4. So you no longer have to run the subscription manager release command to set it explicitly. It's already on the key. And then also what we add in is we add in the repos required for RHEL EUS. You don't have to go do that anymore either, right? So we built opinionation into the activation key workflow. So all you need to know is I need 9.4 EUS. We'll take care of the rest. And you'll see the workload option get updated with, RHEL 10 stuff once RHEL 10 goes GA and we have extended streams for RHEL 10. And then lastly, if we go back to the activation keys page, the last thing that you'll need is you'll need your organization ID, right? Because you need that plus the activation key in order to register the system. Okay, but that's it, right? RHC with an activation key and an org ID that gets you through the door. You run DNF that gets you, your updates, get connected, and if you need to enable any additional repositories, you can go ahead and do that. So the next thing I want to show is I want to show some of the subscription stuff that's available, both the inventory and the usage page. So I'm going to head over to inventory first. And if you'll notice here, the inventory page in the Hybrid Cloud Console doesn't look too dissimilar than the subscriptions inventory page that was available in access.redhat.com, right? It's just the roster of the things you own. It's a list of subs with their SKUs, as well as some information around when they expire and when they don't. And as I can see here, I have access to the Red Hat Beta Access subscription, So I can go use the RHEL Betas. I also have a few other subscriptions here, such as developer for individuals, some EUS subs. This is a lab account, so we got a little bit of everything. And then the last thing that I'm going to show here is we're going to show subscription usage, because this is the thing that effectively replaces a lot of the entitlement attachment stuff. So we're going to head over to subscription usage, and what you'll see here, right, is you'll see usage of RHEL measured in sockets, because that's what RHEL is, historically sold in. And what you'll see in this graph is you'll see usage grouped into four major colors, representing the four major types in which we'll deploy RHEL. So physical, virtual, public cloud, and hypervisor. So instead of having to attach subscriptions to systems, all we ask you to do is just use the software. We'll count it. If you're connected, we'll count it, right? There's some things you got to do if you're a satellite user, and we could talk about those. But if you're a connected customer and you're just registering systems to our hosted portals, we do all the counting for you, right? And you'll see this in the charts here, right? You'll see that, we have what we call the subscription threshold, which basically is if you take all your RHEL subs, you add them all up together, that's the upper cap, right? And then you'll see your usage represented either, below or above that dotted green line. If your usage is below the dotted green line, you have capacity to deploy more systems. If your usage is above the dotted green line, you do not have capacity to deploy more systems. We won't stop you, but we're going to give you all the information so that you can go make the decisions that you need to make, whether that is purchase additional subscriptions, turn off workloads, wherever that may be, you go ahead and do that. The key thing about the subscription service, which I like, is that we have the ability to, go back in the past and look at usage over time, right? We keep this data up to 5 years. So even if you're a customer who's like, I only renew once every 3 years, you'll have usage information that can help guide your purchasing decisions. Okay. And we do that in a way that doesn't block you from using the software. Now, I'm going to go back here because I think this is something like super important and a lot of folks miss in the subscription service. So the first thing is we have the ability to show subscription usage, not just for RHEL, but all the things that sit on top of RHEL. So RHEL across its different architectures, as well as the various RHEL add-ons. So if you want to see something like the extended lifecycle support add-on, which is important if you're running RHEL 7, you probably should buy some of these if you haven't. We can show you the usage of those. I don't have any systems in my inventory currently using them, but they are there. I'm gonna go back to RHEL for a second. RHEL for x86. And then the other thing about the subscription service is that it allows you to filter your usage based upon any parameter that you buy subscriptions on. So it's nice to be able to see at a high level, well, yeah, I'm not using all the RHEL I have, but sometimes you have to ask specific questions like, am I using all my premium RHEL, right? Because premium RHEL and standard RHEL have different price points, right? And in order to do that in a subscription service without the complexity of attaching subscriptions, we use filtering to do that. So I can go ahead and filter my SLA by premium. And what you notice that the chart changes, right? The chart changes because it's now only representing the systems in my inventory that I have explicitly tagged as being premium systems compared to the subscriptions that are in my inventory that are premium subscriptions. And I can actually go and see this down in my current instances and see, oh, okay, those are the systems in my inventory that are tagged as premium. And if I click on current subscriptions, that's the current roster of premium subscriptions that I have. So instead of like me putting this burden on the end user of, I need you to attach the correct subscription to the correct system at the correct time, just use the software. I know how to count Red Hat software. It's ours. We shipped it to you. We know how to count our own stuff. We know what subscriptions you've purchased because we have the database where those subscriptions are stored. This is just a simple matter of mapping usage to a class of subscriptions. And that replaces a lot of the, the attaching of entitlements, which also, leads into the customer experience that I like, which is when you do your renewal, right? And you say, hey, I'm still want to do business with Red Hat. There's nothing you have to do operationally to keep using the software. You don't have to go reattach subscriptions. You just keep using the software, right? And we'll keep measuring it and we'll keep stamping out this chart, which is generated once every 24 hours for most products.
Cool. So I like to repeat things back so I think, I know whether or not I understood it or not. So this is going to be overly simplified. So please tell me where I'm wrong. So the subscription inventory shows us what we bought. Subscription usage shows us what's currently out there. And activation keys not only roll up a bunch of things that we would have had to do manually or scripted through system by system basis, they also help us tie those two things together so that we can understand where we're using what we bought based on all the different parameters that we have available to us, both in activation keys and other things we tag. Is that
Yep.
close?
No, that is absolutely correct.
Right on. So you mentioned this is great. This is the new hosted environment, but we mentioned that satellite's out there and that satellite does a lot of these things and subscriptions through satellite and using those. How does this integrate with what those users might see? How those things are changing? What's
All
what's
right.
up with the satellite end of the subscription world, which I know you're fond of?
Of course, I'm fond of. I mean, I'm literally wearing my satellite shirt right now, right? Like satellite's near and dear to my heart and always has been. So the way satellite fits into the subscription experience really depends on whether you are electing to be a connected customer or a disconnected customer. And when I'm using that terminology, I just want to make sure I define it because different people have different definitions of those terms. A connected customer to me is a customer who is willing to share some data with Red Hat to take advantage of our hosted analytics. And a disconnected customer is one who is not. Okay. The connected satellite customers can take advantage of the subscription service just as I've shown it here. There's actually a plugin that ships in satellite. It's been in satellite since, I believe, the 6.5 release. It's been there for years now. But we have an inventory upload plugin that allows a satellite server to upload its inventory from itself to our hybrid cloud console. And when it does that, you can take advantage of all the same hosted analytics, such as the subscription service, such as Red Hat Insights, that a sysadmin registering a system directly could take advantage of. So for a satellite user, if you're willing and able to share the inventory data, I can generate these same charts for you with no additional work on your part other than turning on the inventory plugin, maybe getting the firewall rule opened up if you aren't sending data to that endpoint already. Our disconnected folks, in which we have plenty of, right? Like satellites, one of its core charters is to service the class of customer who cannot or will not share data with an external entity. That's totally fine, right? We got defense agencies, government agencies who use satellite. That's totally cool. And what we're building for them, and actually what they have in I think 615 satellites and above, is those satellites can now take their inventory, right, and put it in a format, CSV or JSON, such that we can extract it from that satellite. And when I say we, I mean the actual satellite admin, the person on site who's managing satellite. They can take that inventory out of satellite, import that into, a spreadsheet, accounting tool of their choice, and they can calculate their subscription usage there. And we're looking to bring more tools into the disconnected experience to help out, just because we understand that there are valid reasons why folks are unwilling or unable to share data with a hosted service. So satellite is a more or less first-class member of the subscription experience. Things do become a little bit challenging in the disconnected space because it's always that balance of like, how much of Red Hat can I actually ship to you or not? There's certain things I can do in a connected world that are a lot easier because I own all the back office systems here. Whereas in ship software scenario, I may not necessarily have the ability to deliver all the things I want to deliver.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Good. So that's that seems like a fairly straightforward set of things to do in order to get access to all these new capabilities and tools and not, throw an entire workflow out the window just because we made some pretty graphs that are extremely useful, but not necessarily what you're used to.
Yeah, and I think the best way to think about it is there's really three parts to the subscription experience now, and they kind of focus on different personas, because that's the model we've taken going forward. And if you go far enough back and kind of like look at the critiques of the old way we used to do subscription tooling, it was mostly trying to munge together the needs of different personas into a singular set of tools. And it didn't succeed at that, right? Like if I'm an admin and I get told go build a RHEL server with a web server, I'm gonna want to talk in those terms. Okay, well, how do I install RHEL? Where are the packages at? And are there any additional repositories I need to deliver the workload that I've been asked to deliver? Then similarly, if I'm a IT operations person, I likely want to handle things like I want to give this team access to software, but maybe not that team, right? Maybe this team gets RHEL and OpenShift, but that team doesn't get RHEL and OpenShift. They just get RHEL. And then lastly, if I'm a buyer and I'm transacting with Red Hat, I want to figure out where are we using the Red Hat technology so I can best negotiate the best deal between my organization and Red Hat. The old tools try to service all three of those at the same time. And that's where a lot of the complexity came from. And what you'll see now in our modernized subscription experience is that we broke those things apart for different people. That's why Simple Content Access is really focused at the people who need to build and manage workloads, right? Register the system, enable your repos. That's all you got to worry about. Maybe throwing a little bit of tagging through system purpose, but that's not really egregious, right? Me asking you which systems of development once, it's not a horrible thing to ask. And then the subscription service is really built for the buying personas, right? Because folks still need to know, like, how much am I using? Do I need to buy more? Do I need to buy less? What you'll see in the future, and these are things that the team's working on for 2025, is we're introducing some new capabilities that takes advantages of things like workspaces. We're going to start making the workspaces subscription aware as well. So if you're unfamiliar in the hybrid cloud console, we have the concept of workspaces. And what workspaces basically are a means for you as an admin to group together similar systems and use those more or less as a permissions boundary, right? So you can give a person access to one workspace, but not the other, which when you think about how people buy subscriptions, a lot of times it's fairly similar, right? I bought a set of subscriptions for this group of systems because it's going to support this workload or this project or this department. So having workspace aware subscription usage reports is something that is, highly desired by our customer base. And that addresses a lot of the buying personas requirements of like, hey, I need to see usage by this department because I need to know whether or not I need to do show back or charge back and ask them for more money, right?
Sure.
But we can do that in a way without burdening the guy who's like, bro, it's 3:00 in the morning. I was asked to build a RHEL server with, Engine X on it. What's a pool ID? What does that even mean? I'm just trying to build a server, right? And that's why, these tools work together, right? So we've taken the burden off the admin. You just register the systems, connect them up, enable your repos. We'll do the counting. We'll build tools like workspaces and workspace-aware subscription management to help you track your stuff across the enterprise. And we can do all of that in a manner that doesn't impact anyone with any unnecessary burden.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the other thing, and you mentioned environments, I think there's a little inside baseball. You and I you helped me out with a project. I'm working on this image mode stuff. I wanted to build things out in a GitHub environment, but it's RHEL content, so I need to get subscriptions. I need to get these things available so I can actually build that Nginx server. I need access to the repos, right? So for those sorts of super ephemeral, that system lives for all of 6.5 minutes while the build happens, and then it's gone, right? And cloud systems and folks who have labs and all sorts of other things, a lot of our older tooling and a lot of our older mentality, right, was subscriptions are for a year, and it was a little bit difficult to handle those sorts of ephemeral environments. I noticed when we were working together, it was actually really, really simple to do that in the GitHub environment. I had overly complicated things. You set me straight. So, are there improvements? Like, was I seeing something based on simple content access, or what does this bring to those folks who don't have 24/7, 365, 10-year life cycle systems?
Right. All right. So one of the things that we tackled a while ago, and this was actually somewhat independent of simple content, was making sure that containers had a good experience when running on Red Hat platforms. Right. So we're like, hey, we support RHEL as a container platform, through Podman. We support OpenShift as a container platform. We need to make sure that when folks spin up Red Hat containers on Red Hat platforms, they have a great experience, right? Like, it's all our stuff. So we have no excuse for it not to work well. And that's what we focused on first, right? We wanted to make it so that if you have a RHEL system that is connected, whether it's connected to a satellite server or connected to our hosted properties, when you stand up a Red Hat container, it will have access to, subscription content. Like, that's a thing that just happens intrinsically out of the box, right?
Yeah. Let me interrupt 1 second just to provide a little bit of context there, because I realize I don't think I said it well enough. And if folks want to watch, we did a hour-long deep dive on image mode and why containers are important. But the TLDR is the build process for a new image mode system, right? It's basically a container build that, again, we abuse the fact that the OCI folks never really set limits on how big containers could be. So we shove a whole 4 gig operating system into a container, wrap it with that fancy tarball and metadata, shove it up into Quay, and eventually container registry folks might get mad at us when this takes off, because we're now shoving 5 gig images into their systems as opposed to 500 meg things. But that's why I just want to put that out there as a little bit of context to why we're starting with simple container subscription usage is important as the first step. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So the first thing for us was just make sure that containers are not disenfranchised on Red Hat platforms. Then we started tackling some of the more advanced use cases. And this is where simple content does become useful in a container space. Honestly, it's useful for ephemeral stuff in general, not just containers, right? In the old model, you had a fixed number of subscriptions. And because subscriptions granted access to repositories, you had to attach one to get access to bits. If you were running something like a CI/CD pipeline where you're spinning systems up and you're tearing them down, one of the things that you had to be cognizant of is making sure that you reclaim your old subscriptions from the systems that you spun down, right? Because you only got a fixed quantity of them. And when you run out, nobody gets updates. And if you were, a good admin and you build your automation right and everything worked well, you could do this. But it was a level of complexity that honestly you didn't really need, right? And then when simple content comes along, because I don't have to attach subscriptions, you still want to clean up your inventory because no one wants a dirty inventory. But the penalty for not cleaning up your inventory isn't you being denied access to updates, right? So let's say, for instance, a great example here is that, maybe you have a pipeline where, you register a system and install some software. And, when that pipeline finishes successfully, we clean up the system. But what if there was like an abnormal run and something happened and that system didn't get cleaned up? Right now, in the past, you would have a system record holding up an entitlement that you had to go find, right, through the UI, the API, or whatever, and reclaim. You no longer have to do that when simple content's enabled. So this makes a lot of the container workflows significantly easier, right? So, for folks who are like, I want to build a container file, I want to have a registration command in there, right? Because I'm using that container file effectively as a description of the thing I need built, right? You can put all your stuff in your container file, and you know that I can hand this container file out fairly liberally throughout my organization. And when someone runs it, they will get connected, they will get access to the bits, and it will complete successfully without you having to be an expert in subscription management.
Yeah, and I can verify that if you manually cancel my original workflows, it would not clean itself up, even though we had that step in there that explicitly cleaned up at the end of the run, right? Because the workflow ended abnormally, just like you said. And not just containers, right? This also applies to anybody who's doing maybe not
Anything.
minutes lived, but like, week-long systems in the cloud if you're using spot instances or any of those sorts of things where it's just not a full-time system, and you're going to have an issue in the old sorts of paradigms of needing to release and watch that inventory and know what's current and what's not current. This all helps with managing that without having to manage it, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're getting close to our allotted time. Rich, are you here to plug something? Do you have a book tour, concert? Do you have a lab you want to tell us about? Something else that you want us to let us know about?
So yeah, the only things I would say at this point is let's see, on the public labs page, we do have a lab that covers the subscription service. So if you're unfamiliar or you want to dive in a little bit more into how the subscription service works, we actually have a self-paced instruct lab that covers a lot of the details. Covers a lot of what I demoed today, but a little bit more detail. And it's completely, self-paced. So I will plug that. And then also, if you haven't, Red Hat Summit's in a couple months. So I'd like to see you there if you could make it. But other than that, that's all I got.
All righty. Well, Rich, thanks so much for joining us today and giving all this great information and also helping me with all the things I needed to do dealing with this. So now I have things I got to go back and update. I think now that I think about it, I got to go back and update that GitHub flow because we were using Subman, and I think we got to figure out how to use it with RHC now. So new action item after a beta episode. But yeah, thanks. Appreciate your time. For folks out there, if you haven't yet tried the beta, you've got access. Right? We talked about it. Go ahead and get yourself access from the portal with that beta subscription that Rich worked so hard on. We also, if you don't have resources or you don't have the time, we also have our hands-on lab environment for the 10 beta. It's got just pulled up on screen. So along with the subscription experience, you can get hands-on with the beta lab in our instruct environments. So don't forget to leave us a comment with your new, strange, interesting, whatever favorite feature you found in the release notes. You too might be featured on a future episode. And just, leave us a comment on how many times I said CentOS differently last week, even though I asked someone, how do they pronounce CentOS? So speaking of upcoming episodes, we are going to take a short recess, but after that, we'll be back with some chats with a Fedora ambassador to talk about how he tracks innovation through projects to product. We're going to talk about how to make pods and quadlets in Podman 5 because there's some new things going on there and more. All right. So until then, on behalf of myself, producer Scott, special guest Rich, and all of us on the Red Hat Enterprise Linux team, thank you for joining us and see you next time.